baby is that?" The glass slipped from my hand and shattered across the floor. The entire bar went silent. I froze, one hand instinctively moving to my stomach, the other gripping the counter so hard I felt the wood splinter beneath my nails. Patrick Wilson stood in the doorway like death itself had walked in from the Chicago rain. 6'3", custom suit soaked through, eyes that had watched men die without blinking. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone knew what happened to people who caught his attention. "I asked you a question, Caroline." My throat closed. How did he know my real name? I'd been Stephanie Miller for 3 months. New ID, new life, new person. The pregnant bartender nobody looked at twice. Invisible. Safe. Until now. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered. He crossed the room in 4 strides, and the crowd parted like he carried a plague. When he reached the bar, he leaned close enough that I could see the rain on his eyelashes. "You're 6 months pregnant. You've been using a dead woman's social security number. And the baby you're carrying," his voice dropped to barely a whisper, "that baby is worth $50 million to the right buyer." The room spun. Nobody was supposed to know. Not about the pregnancy, not about my identity, and definitely not about what the baby really was. What happened in the next 72 hours would leave 6 people dead, expose a conspiracy that reached the FBI's highest levels, reveal that Patrick Crane had never existed at all, and prove that everything I believed about my pregnancy was a carefully constructed lie. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that Patrick Wilson had just said something impossible, and the way he was looking at me suggested the nightmare was only beginning. 3 months earlier, I'd walked into Danny's bar with a backpack, $300, and a secret that would get me killed if the wrong people found out. Danny Kowalski hired me without questions. No background check, no references, just a chance. And for 93 days, it worked perfectly. I served drinks, collected tips, went home to my studio above the laundromat, tried not to think about Seattle, tried not to think about Jason, tried not to think about the night everything shattered. But then Patrick Wilson started coming in. First time, Tuesday, 11 p.m., whiskey neat, $100 tip, gone in 15 minutes. Second time, Thursday, same routine. By the 5th visit, I noticed things that made my skin crawl. The way other customers avoided his section. The way Danny's hands shook when Patrick ordered. The way 2 men always positioned themselves near exits when he arrived. "Stay away from that one," Danny warned after Patrick left one night. "Who is he?" Danny looked at me like I asked who Gravity was. "Patrick Wilson. His family owns half the South Side. Been running this city before you were born." He paused. "And men like him don't come to dive bars unless they're hunting something." Ice crawled down my spine. "What's he hunting?" "Don't know? Don't want to know," Danny's voice dropped, "and neither should you." But what Danny didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd spent 2 years married to Jason Carmichael. I knew exactly what men like Patrick Wilson looked like when they hunted. And Patrick wasn't hunting, he was waiting. The question was, waiting for what? The pregnancy had been an accident, or at least that's what I believed for the first 4 months. I discovered I was pregnant 2 weeks after sleeping with Wilson Crane, Jason's business partner. One stupid night after discovering Jason had been lying about everything, his business, his family, what he really did in those basement meetings. Wilson had been kind, understanding, everything Jason wasn't, and I'd made a choice I couldn't take back. When the pregnancy test came back positive, I knew 3 things immediately. 1, Jason would kill me if he found out. 2, Wilson was already dead. Jason had discovered his betrayal and handled it personally. 3, I had maybe 72 hours before someone connected the timeline. So I ran. Disappeared into America's underbelly with cash and fake documents and the desperate hope that 3,000 miles would be enough. But what I didn't know, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that the pregnancy itself was the reason I was still alive. Someone needed me pregnant. Someone needed this specific baby to be born, and they'd orchestrated everything to make sure it happened exactly as planned. Patrick came in every week after that first month, always alone, always one drink, always watching me with eyes that saw too much. I tried to ignore him, tried to serve him quickly and move to other customers, but there was something in the way he looked at me that made everything feel wrong. Not threatening exactly, not predatory, something else, something that felt like recognition. Then, one night in February, my past walked through the door. The bar was packed, Friday rush, music loud, people drunk and careless. I was making a martini when I felt it, that crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, being watched. I turned, expecting Patrick at his usual spot. Instead, I saw Derek Santos standing near the entrance, phone to his ear, eyes locked directly on me. One of Jason's enforcers, one of the men who'd been in the room when Wilson died. My hand started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the shaker. He hadn't noticed I'd seen him yet, still on the phone, still talking, but his gaze kept returning to my face, calculating, confirming. I needed to run, now, before... Caroline? I jumped hard enough to slam my hip into the counter. Patrick Wilson stood directly in front of me. "You need to breathe," he said quietly. "I'm fine." "No." His eyes flicked toward the entrance, then back. "You're about to bolt, and if you run right now, the man watching you will follow, and you'll be dead before you reach the next block." My lungs forgot how to work. "I don't..." The man in the dark jacket. Phone. Derek Santos. Works for Jason Carmichael out of Seattle. He's been standing there for 6 minutes, and he just sent a text that said, "Confirmed." So I'll ask you once, do you want to live through the next hour? I stared at him. How do you... Later. Right now, you go to the back office. Lock the door. Don't come out until I knock 3 times. His voice was ice. And Caroline, when this is over, you're going to tell me the truth about everything. What are you going to do? Patrick's smile was cold enough to frost glass. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Santos about the importance of respecting boundaries in my city. I didn't argue, didn't question how Patrick knew Derek's name or Jason's or why he was helping me. I just ran to the back office and locked the door. 30 seconds later, I heard shouting, glass breaking, a gunshot that made my ears ring. Then silence. Patrick knocked 3 times. When I opened the door, he was alone. No blood on his suit, no weapon visible, just that same cold calm he always wore like armor. Derek Santos left Chicago. He won't be coming back. Did you... No, but he understands that you're under my protection now, and that if anyone from Seattle comes looking again, there will be consequences. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt trapped. Why are you helping me? Because I've been watching you for 3 months. Because I know you're not who you claim to be. And because... He paused. Because I need to know what makes you valuable enough that Jason Carmichael would send someone across state lines to find you. There it was, the real reason. Patrick Wilson didn't help people out of kindness. He collected information, leverage, power. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Yes, you do. He stepped closer. "And right now you have two choices. You can keep lying and hope the next person Jason sends is as easy to handle as Derek, or you can trust me long enough to figure out how to survive this." "I don't trust crime bosses." "Smart. You shouldn't." His expression didn't change. "But I'm the only thing standing between you and a very painful death, so maybe you should reconsider your options." My hand moved to my stomach. 6 months pregnant, alone in a city I barely knew, running from a man who would torture me for answers before he killed me. "If I tell you the truth," I said slowly, "what do you want in return?" Patrick's smile was sharp. "Let's start with the truth, then we'll negotiate price." We met at a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Patrick's home. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, security so tight I'd counted 4 cameras and 3 armed guards just getting to the elevator. He poured water, handed me a glass, and sat across from me like we were discussing stock portfolios. "Start from the beginning," he said. "How much do you already know?" "I know Jason Carmichael runs criminal operations in Seattle. I know you're his wife. I know you disappeared 6 months ago after his business partner Wilson Crane was killed for embezzlement." Patrick's eyes never left mine. "And I know the baby you're carrying is connected to something worth killing for." He knew almost everything, except the part that would get us both killed. Wilson Crane was working with federal prosecutors, embezzling from Jason, yes, but also gathering evidence, bank records, communications, witness testimony, enough to dismantle the entire organization. "And you helped him?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "I didn't know anything about it until after he was dead. But Jason thinks I did. He thinks Wilson told me everything before he died." "Did he?" I met Patrick's gaze. "Wilson called me the night before Jason killed him, told me I needed to run, told me the baby I was carrying wasn't safe." "Why wouldn't the baby be safe?" This was it. The part I'd never told anyone, the secret that had kept me alive and running for 6 months. "Because the baby isn't Jason's," I whispered. "It's Wilson's." Patrick's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. "You had an affair with your husband's business partner." "One night, after I found out Jason had been lying about everything. Wilson was kind, and I was desperate, and—" My voice cracked. "And then I got pregnant, and when Wilson found out, he told me to run, told me Jason could never know, told me—" I stopped, because this was the part that still didn't make sense. "Told you what?" Patrick pressed. "He said the baby was special, that people would come looking, that I needed to disappear completely and trust no one." I looked down at my stomach. "But he died before he could explain what he meant." Patrick stood, walked to the window, stared out at the city. 3 weeks ago," he said quietly, "I received an encrypted message from an unknown source. It contained your photograph, your location, and instructions." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of instructions?" "To keep you alive, to keep you hidden, to make sure nothing happened to you or the baby until—" He turned to face me. "Until the baby was born." The room tilted. "Who sent it?" "I don't know. The encryption was military grade, untraceable." His jaw tightened. "But whoever sent it also transferred $50 million to an offshore account as a down payment, with the promise of $45 million when the baby is safely delivered." I couldn't breathe. "Someone is paying you to protect me?" "Someone is paying me to protect the baby." His eyes were dark. "You're just the incubator they need alive." The words hit like a physical blow. "You've been using me." "I've been keeping you alive." "While waiting to sell my baby to the highest bidder?" "No," Patrick's voice cut through my panic. I've been trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because whoever wants this baby alive is powerful enough to move $50 million without leaving a trace, and that kind of power doesn't belong to Jason Carmichael. I stood, backing toward the door. I need to leave.
You leave, you die. Jason's people are watching every bus station and airport within 500 miles. Then I'll drive. With what car? What money? What plan? Patrick moved between me and the exit. You're 6 months pregnant, alone, and running from people you don't even know exist. How far do you think you'll get? Further than staying with someone who sees my baby as a payday. I see your baby as a mystery that's going to get us both killed if we don't solve it first. His composure finally cracked. Do you understand what's happening here? Someone orchestrated your pregnancy. Someone knew about Wilson's betrayal before Jason did. Someone has been moving chess pieces for months, and we're standing right in the middle of the board with targets on our backs. I stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying Wilson Crane didn't call you the night before he died to save you. Patrick's voice went quiet. He called you because he'd figured out the truth, and whatever he discovered was worth dying for. I stayed. Not because I trusted Patrick, because I had nowhere else to go, and because, God help me, he was right. Something was wrong, something bigger than an affair, bigger than Jason's revenge, bigger than anything I had imagined. Over the next 2 weeks, Patrick's people dug into everything: Wilson Crane's background, my medical records, the timeline of my pregnancy, and slowly, piece by piece, the picture started forming. Wilson Crane didn't exist before 8 years ago. His social security number belonged to a man who died in 2005. His college records were fabricated. His entire identity was a cover. He was federal, Patrick said, spreading documents across his dining table. Most likely FBI, deep undercover, inserted into Jason's organization to build a case. Then why did Jason's people kill him? Because someone burned him. Someone told Jason exactly where to find Wilson and exactly what he was doing. Patrick looked up. Someone who wanted Wilson dead and you pregnant and running. My hands shook. That doesn't make sense. It does if the pregnancy was the goal all along. Wilson was following orders. Maybe he thought he was protecting you. Maybe he genuinely cared, but someone gave him those orders. Patrick's finger tapped a document. Your prenatal records show something interesting. You're not 6 months pregnant. What? According to the ultrasound measurements and hormone levels, you're 8 months along, nearly 9. The room spun. That's impossible. I know exactly when you slept with Wilson Crane, yes, which should make you 6 months pregnant. He slid another paper toward me. But your first trimester symptoms started 2 weeks before that night. You were already pregnant when you slept with Wilson Crane. I couldn't process the words. No, that's... Caroline. His voice was gentle, terrible. When did you last sleep with Jason? Not for months before that night. He was barely home. I stopped, because there had been one night, 3 months before Wilson. Jason had come home drunk, angry. He'd forced himself on me, and the next morning he acted like nothing happened. I'd tried to forget, tried to bury it. But the timeline... Oh, God, I whispered. The baby is Jason's. But Wilson told me to run, told me the baby was special. Why would he do that if...
Because someone made him believe the baby was his. Someone altered your medical records. Someone wanted you to run, wanted you pregnant and scared and thinking you were carrying Wilson's child. Patrick's eyes were dark. Someone needed you exactly where you are right now. Who would do that? Why? Before Patrick could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his entire face changed. We have a problem." The problem was waiting in the lobby of Patrick's building. A woman, mid-50s, expensive coat, FBI credentials, Special Agent Stephanie Torres. "Mr. Wilson," she said pleasantly, "we need to talk about the pregnant fugitive you're harboring." Patrick's expression never changed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Caroline Hart, also known as Caroline Carmichael, wanted for questioning in connection with the murder of federal agent Wilson Crane. Torres smiled. "The agent, I should mention, who was killed 6 months ago while investigating her husband's criminal organization." My legs almost gave out. Patrick's hand steadied me. "Do you have a warrant?" he asked. "I have a subpoena requiring Mrs. Carmichael to appear before a grand jury. I also have reason to believe she's in immediate danger. Your husband knows you're in Chicago, Mrs. Carmichael, and he's not the only one looking for you." "Who else is looking?" Patrick asked. "People who believe the baby she's carrying is worth more alive than dead." Torres's voice hardened. "People who have already killed 3 federal agents trying to get to her. People who won't stop until they have what they want." "What do they want?" I asked. Torres looked at me for a long moment. "They want to know who really killed Wilson Crane, because it wasn't your husband." The world stopped. "What did you just say?" "Jason Carmichael didn't kill Wilson Crane. He took credit for it, yes, but our forensics show a different shooter, a professional, someone with military training." Torres stepped closer. "Someone who wanted everyone to believe Jason was responsible, while the real killer disappeared." "Who?" Patrick demanded. "That's what we're trying to figure out, because 24 hours before he died, Wilson sent an encrypted message to FBI headquarters. It contained 3 words: 'The baby knows.'" I felt the child move inside me, kick, fight, like it could hear what was being said. "That's impossible," I whispered. "How could the baby know anything?" Torres's expression was pitying. "That's exactly what we need you to help us understand, Mrs. Carmichael, because whatever Wilson discovered, whatever he meant by that message, it died with him. Unless the baby really does know something," Patrick finished. Torres nodded. "We have reason to believe Wilson implanted some form of genetic marker in the fetus, information encoded at the cellular level that can only be accessed through DNA analysis after birth." My hand flew to my stomach. "You're saying my baby is carrying evidence?" "We're saying your baby might be the only remaining proof of a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government, and the people who orchestrated this will kill anyone who gets in their way." Patrick's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face went white. "Jason's here, in the building." We had 90 seconds. That's what Patrick's security estimated before Jason reached the penthouse. Torres pulled her weapon. "I can protect you, both of you. Witness protection, new identities, complete—" "No," I said. Both of them stared at me. "Wilson told me to trust no one. The FBI killed him, or someone in the FBI did, or someone pretending to be FBI." I looked at Torres. "How do I know you're really here to protect me?" Torres's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. "You're not FBI," Patrick said quietly, "are you?" "I'm trying to prevent a war," Torres said. "A war that will happen if the information Wilson encoded reaches the wrong people." "What information?" I demanded. The elevator dinged. Torres raised her weapon toward the door. Names, dates, proof that the Russian government has been running assets inside the FBI for 15 years. Wilson discovered it. He tried to report it, and they killed him for it. The elevator doors opened. Jason stepped out, flanked by 4 armed men. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Torres. "Hello, Mother," he said. The world tilted sideways. Torres, or whoever she really was, smiled. "Hello, Jason. It's been a long time." Patrick moved in front of me, but Jason's men had their weapons up. "Let me guess," Jason said, walking slowly into the penthouse. "She told you some story about federal conspiracies and encoded DNA and Russian assets." "It's true," Torres said calmly. "Every word. Oh, I'm sure parts of it are true. The parts about Wilson being FBI, the parts about the baby carrying encoded DNA." Jason's smile was cold. "But what she didn't tell you is that she's not trying to stop a war. She's trying to start one." "He's lying," Torres said. "Jason, tell them." "Her real name is Svetlana Volkov. She's Russian intelligence, has been for 30 years. Jason's eyes never left her. "And the baby Caroline is carrying? It's not mine. It's not Wilson's. It's yours, Mother, courtesy of IVF, stolen genetic material, and a very talented medical team." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Is it?" Jason looked at me with something almost like pity. "Did Wilson actually sleep with you that night, or do you just remember sleeping with him?" The memory felt fuzzy, distant. Wine, conversation, Wilson's apartment, his hands on my shoulders, gentle, saying something I couldn't quite hear anymore. Then nothing, then waking up in his bed, assuming, "You drugged me," I said. "Wilson drugged you, on her orders," Jason gestured to Torres. "She needed you pregnant with her genetic material, needed you running from me, needed you scared and isolated so that when the baby was born, she could claim it and disappear before anyone realized what happened." "Why?" Patrick demanded. "Why go through all this?" "Because the baby is a backup copy," Jason said quietly. "The baby's DNA contains everything Wilson stole. Every name, every operation, every asset the Russians have in Western governments. Encoded genetically, impossible to hack or steal, waiting to be decoded after birth." Torres's weapon steadied. "Smart boy, your father would be proud." "My father was a fool who believed you loved him." Jason's voice went cold. "Just like Wilson believed you when you told him he was doing the right thing. Just like Caroline believed she was protecting an innocent baby." "What happens now?" Patrick asked. Torres smiled. "Now Jason shoots you both, takes Caroline, and waits for the baby to be born. Then I disappear with the child, Jason takes over his father's empire, and everyone wins." "Except Caroline," Patrick said. "Except Caroline," Torres agreed. Jason raised his weapon, pointed it at Patrick. "I'm sorry," he said to me. "For what it's worth, I did love you, before all this." His finger moved to the trigger, and I made a choice. I stepped in front of Patrick Wilson. "You want the baby?" I said to Torres. "Come get it." Then I drove my elbow into Patrick's ribs, grabbed the gun from his waistband, and fired 3 shots. Not at Jason, at the window. The glass exploded outward. Chicago wind and rain screamed into the penthouse, and in the chaos that followed, I grabbed Patrick's hand and ran. We made it to the service elevator, rode it down in silence, both of us bleeding from glass cuts, both of us knowing we had maybe minutes before Jason's people found us. "Why did you save me?" Patrick asked. "Because you're the only person in this mess who hasn't lied to me yet." How do you know? I don't. I looked at him, but I'm out of options. The elevator reached the basement parking garage. Patrick's car was waiting. We drove through Chicago's rain-soaked streets, no destination, just distance between us and everyone hunting us. What's your plan? Find somewhere to have this baby safely, get the DNA analyzed, figure out what information Wilson really encoded, and then... I stopped. And then what? And then I burn everyone. Jason, Torres, the FBI, the Russians, everyone who thought they could use my body as a storage device without asking. Patrick's smile was sharp. Because I'm tired of powerful people thinking they can do whatever they want in my city. He glanced at me. And because you're the first person in 15 years who's treated me like a human being instead of a weapon. I barely know you. You saved my life. You saved mine first. Then I guess we're even. We drove for hours, found a small hotel in Indiana, paid cash, collapsed into separate beds, exhausted and terrified and alive. The baby kicked. Hard, like it was fighting, like it knew. The baby knows, I whispered, repeating Wilson's message. And suddenly, I understood. Wilson hadn't encoded information in the baby's DNA. He'd encoded a message to me. The baby knows who killed me. The baby knows the truth. The baby knows how to stop them. Patrick? I said into the darkness. Yeah? Wilson was trying to tell me something. The encrypted message, it wasn't about the baby knowing information. Then what? It was about the baby's identity, about who the baby really is. Patrick sat up. What are you saying? I'm saying if Torres used IVF, if she implanted her genetic material, if this entire pregnancy was orchestrated, I took a breath, then Wilson would have known. He was FBI. He would have run DNA tests. He would have discovered the truth. Which is, I looked at him. The baby isn't Torres's. The genetic material was switched, and the person who switched it left proof of who really killed Wilson and why. How do you know? Because Wilson told me to run, told me to trust no one, told me the baby was special. My hand moved to my stomach. He wouldn't say that if the baby was just Russian data storage. He'd say it if the baby was evidence that could destroy everyone involved. Patrick was quiet for a long moment. If you're right, then the baby is the most dangerous thing in America right now. I know. And everyone will be hunting you until you give birth. I know. So what do we do? I looked at him. We find out whose DNA the baby really carries. We decode whatever Wilson left behind. And then we end this. How? By giving birth in the most public way possible, live-streamed, documented, with DNA testing and media coverage and every possible witness, so that no one can make this baby disappear. Patrick stared at me. You're going to turn your child's birth into a press conference? I'm going to turn my child's birth into insurance, because once the truth is public, once everyone knows what this baby represents, they can't kill it without exposing themselves. They'll still try. Then we'd better be ready. The next 3 weeks were a blur. Patrick used his connections to arrange everything. Private doctors who asked no questions, media contacts who would run the story, security teams loyal to him, and DNA analysis from a lab that specialized in genetic forensics. The results came back 2 days before my due date. I read them 3 times before I believed what I was seeing. I can't believe this is right, I whispered. Patrick looked over my shoulder. Jesus Christ! The baby wasn't Torres's, wasn't Wilson's, wasn't even Jason's. The genetic material belonged to Viktor Volkov, Torres's brother, the head of Russian intelligence. They weren't trying to create a data storage device, Patrick said slowly. They were creating an heir, a child who could claim both American and Russian citizenship, a child who could access classified information from both governments when they came of age. Wilson figured it out, I said. He discovered Torres had stolen her brother's genetic material, used my body to create a child who would be positioned perfectly to become a double agent in 20 years. And when he tried to stop it, Torres killed him, made it look like Jason was responsible, and then set everything in motion to make sure the baby was born exactly as planned. My hands shook. I've been carrying a Russian intelligence asset for 9 months? No, Patrick's voice was firm. You've been carrying a baby who didn't choose any of this, just like you, just like me, just like everyone caught in this mess. I looked at him. What are we going to do? Exactly what you said. We go public, we expose everything, and we make sure this child gets a choice about their own future. They'll kill us. Probably. Patrick's smile was sad. But at least we'll die doing the right thing. I went into labor on a Tuesday. We'd arranged everything. Private hospital room with security, media credentials for 6 different news organizations, DNA testing equipment, and a live stream that would broadcast everything to 40,000 viewers. The contraction started at noon. By 3 p.m., I was in active labor. By 6 p.m., every intelligence agency in the world was watching. Jason arrived at 7, Torres at 7:30, and at 8:17 p.m., I gave birth to a baby girl, 8 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair, her father's eyes, Viktor Volkov's genetics, but my daughter nonetheless. The DNA results were broadcast live. The media ran with the story immediately. Russian intelligence asset born in Chicago hospital. FBI cover-up exposed in genetic conspiracy. The baby that started a war. Torres was arrested within hours. Jason disappeared before federal agents could reach him. And I sat in that hospital bed holding my daughter, knowing that her life would never be normal. But at least it would be hers. What are you going to name her? Patrick asked. I looked down at the tiny face, so perfect and innocent and unaware of the storm she'd been born into. Julia, I said, after your mother. Caroline! You saved us, both of us. You could have sold us out a dozen times, and you didn't. I met his eyes. You chose to protect us, even when it would have been easier to walk away. That deserves to be remembered. Patrick's voice was rough. What happens now? Now we figure out how to keep her safe, how to give her a life that isn't defined by genetics or conspiracy or any of this nightmare. That's going to be hard. Everything worth doing is hard. He smiled. Can I hold her? I placed Julia in his arms and watched his face transform. Wonder, fear, love, all of it visible in a man who'd spent his life hiding emotion. She's perfect, he whispered. She is. And in that moment, I realized something. Wilson had been right. The baby did know. Not information, not evidence, but the truth that I'd spent my entire life looking for. That family isn't about genetics or blood or careful planning. It's about the people who choose to show up, who choose to fight, who choose to love you even when the entire world is trying to tear you apart. Patrick Wilson wasn't Julia's biological father, but he was there when she took her first breath, and he'd be there for every breath after. That made him family. That made us family. And for the first time in 9 months, I let myself believe we might actually survive this. 6 months later, I testified before Congress, told them everything. Torres's conspiracy, Wilson's investigation, Jason's involvement, the genetic manipulation, all of it. Torres was sentenced to life in federal prison. Jason was never found, though rumors placed him in South America. And Julia grew, learned to smile, to laugh, to reach for Patrick with tiny hands whenever he walked into a room. We moved into a house in the suburbs, normal, quiet, protected by security that Patrick insisted on but made invisible. And slowly, carefully, we built something that felt like a life. Not perfect, not what I'd imagined, but real. On Julia's first birthday, Patrick gave her a necklace, a small pendant with an inscription. "What does it say?" I asked. He showed me. "She knows." I looked at him. "Wilson's message." "Wilson's promise," Patrick corrected, "that she would grow up knowing the truth, knowing who she is, knowing she has choices." "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For being here, for choosing us." I took his hand. "For being the father she deserves." "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." Patrick pulled me close, and we watched Julia destroy her birthday cake with the focused intensity of a child who'd been given something sweet. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Okay?" "The message I received, the encrypted one that started all this, the one offering $50 million to keep you safe. What about it?" "I tracked down the source last week." My heart stopped. "Who sent it?" "Wilson Crane." Patrick's voice was soft. "He set up a dead man switch. If he didn't check in every 48 hours, the message would auto-send to people he trusted, along with all the evidence he'd gathered about Torres's conspiracy." "But how did he know to include you?" "Because 3 years ago, I helped the FBI with a different case. Wilson was the agent I worked with. We stayed in contact. He knew if anything happened to him, you'd need protection, and he knew I was the only person in Chicago who could provide it. He planned this. He planned for you to survive, for Julia to survive, for the truth to come out." Patrick's jaw tightened. "He died making sure that happened." I looked at Julia, covered in frosting, laughing at something only she understood. "She gave her a chance," I said. "He gave you both a chance." "No!" I turned to Patrick. "You did. Wilson made a plan, but you chose to follow through. You chose to risk everything. You chose to be here." "I didn't have a choice." "You did. You always did. And you chose us." Patrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'd choose you again, every time." And standing in that suburban kitchen, watching our daughter destroy her birthday cake, I realized something. The conspiracy had tried to make Julia a weapon. Torres wanted her as an asset. Victor wanted her as an heir. Everyone had plans for who she would become. But Julia wasn't any of those things. She was just a child, our child, and she would grow up knowing something none of us had known, that she was loved, completely, unconditionally, regardless of genetics or plans or conspiracies. That was Wilson's real gift, not the evidence, not the protection, but the chance for Julia to be ordinary, to be safe, to be free. "Happy birthday, baby girl," I whispered, and as Patrick wrapped his arms around both of us, as Julia laughed and reached for her father, I understood. We'd survived, all of us, not because of careful planning or genetic engineering or intelligence conspiracies, but because when it mattered most, imperfect people made impossible choices. And that's what family really is. Not the DNA you carry, but the people who choose to carry you when you can't stand on your own. Patrick Wilson chose us. We chose him. And together, we chose to give Julia something none of us ever had. A future built on truth instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation, on love instead of duty. That's the story I'll tell her when she's old enough to understand. Not about Russian conspiracies or encoded genetics, but about the FBI agent who died protecting her, the crime boss who risked everything to save her, and the mother who learned that the strongest thing you can do isn't run from danger, it's stand and fight for the people you love. Even when the whole world is hunting you, even when the odds are impossible, even when you're terrified and alone and 9 months pregnant in a city that isn't home. You stand, you fight, you choose love. And sometimes, if you're lucky, love chooses you back. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories.